Learning English doesn't have to be hard. In fact, most people struggle not because English is difficult, but because they're using the wrong methods. If you want to learn English the easy way and actually start improving faster, make sure to watch the video till the end, subscribe to the channel, and stay consistent with what you're about to learn. Because the truth is, learning English isn't about talent, it's about using the right approach and sticking with it. In this video, I'm going to show you simple and effective ways to learn English without stress, without overcomplicating things, and without wasting your time on methods that don't work. These are practical techniques you can start using immediately to build confidence, improve your speaking, and understand English more naturally. Method 1. Learn through listening first. One of the easiest and most natural ways to learn English is by listening as much as possible. Think about how you learned your first language. You didn't begin with grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists. You listened first. Your brain absorbs sounds, patterns, and meanings over time, without pressure. The same process works when learning English. When you expose yourself to the language regularly, your brain starts adapting to it naturally. When you listen consistently, your brain begins to recognize how words are pronounced, how sentences are structured, and how real conversations flow. At the beginning, you may not understand everything, and that's completely normal. You are still training your ear. Even when things sound unclear, your brain is slowly building familiarity. Over time, words that once sounded confusing will start to feel familiar, and you'll begin to understand more without actively trying. The key is to listen to content that is slightly above your level but still understandable in parts. This could be simple videos, beginner-friendly podcasts, or shows with subtitles. You don't need to understand every word. In fact, trying to do that can slow you down and make learning feel stressful. Instead, focus on the general meaning and the context. Let your brain fill in the gaps naturally. Consistency is more important than intensity. Listening for 10 to 20 minutes every day is far more effective than long sessions once in a while. Daily exposure keeps the language fresh in your mind and helps your brain adapt faster. Over time, this consistent input builds a strong foundation that makes everything else, like speaking and reading, much easier. It's also helpful to mix active and passive listening. Active listening means paying attention to pronunciation, repeating phrases, and noticing how sentences are formed. Passive listening means having English in the background while you're doing other things. Both are valuable. Active listening improves your understanding, while passive listening increases your overall exposure to the language. Another benefit of listening first is that it builds your confidence. When you hear the same words and phrases repeatedly, they start to feel natural. This makes it easier to use them when you speak. Instead of translating in your head, you begin to respond more automatically, because your brain is already familiar with the language patterns. Over time, this habit transforms the way you learn. Speaking becomes easier, understanding becomes faster, and the language starts to feel more natural. Instead of struggling to form sentences, you begin to recall what you've heard and use it naturally in conversations. Method 2. Don't translate, think in English. One of the most common mistakes people make when learning English is trying to translate everything from their native language. At first, this might feel helpful, but over time it actually slows you down. Every time you want to speak, your brain has to go through multiple steps, first thinking in your language, then translating into English, and finally speaking. This process takes time and makes your speech feel unnatural and hesitant. The problem with translation is that languages don't work the same way. Sentence structures, expressions, and meanings are often different. When you translate directly, you can end up creating sentences that sound incorrect or unnatural, even if the words themselves are right. This is why many learners feel stuck, they know the words, but they struggle to use them smoothly in real conversations. To improve faster, you need to train your brain to think directly in English. This might feel difficult at the beginning, but you don't need to start with complex sentences. Begin with very simple thoughts. For example, when you wake up, you can think, "I'm tired," or "I need coffee." When you're walking, you can describe what you see: "It's sunny, the street is busy," or "that car is fast." These small mental exercises help your brain connect ideas directly to English words without going through translation. Over time, these simple thoughts become more natural and automatic. You won't need to pause and translate anymore, because your brain will already be used to forming sentences in English. This makes speaking much faster, smoother, and more confident. Another useful technique is to talk to yourself in English. You can describe what you're doing, plan your day, or even think through problems in English. It may feel strange at first, but it's one of the most effective ways to practice without needing a partner. The more you do this, the more comfortable you become using the language in real time. It's also important to be patient with this process. At the beginning, you may still translate sometimes, and that's okay. The goal is not to eliminate translation instantly, but to reduce it gradually. With consistent practice, thinking in English becomes easier and more natural. As this habit develops, you'll notice a big improvement in your fluency. You'll spend less time thinking about what to say and more time actually expressing yourself. Conversations will feel smoother, and your confidence will grow because you're no longer relying on translation to communicate. Over time, thinking in English becomes your default, and that's when the language truly starts to feel natural. Method 3. Speak from day one. Many people believe they need to reach a certain level before they start speaking English. They wait until they feel ready, thinking they need more vocabulary, better grammar, or perfect pronunciation first. But the truth is, that moment of feeling fully ready almost never comes. Waiting only slows your progress and keeps you stuck in learning mode without actually using the language in real situations. Speaking is not something you master before you start, it's something you improve by doing. The faster you begin speaking, the faster you build confidence and fluency. Even if your sentences are simple or not perfect, you are training your brain to use English in real time, which is very different from just understanding or memorizing words. At the beginning, it's completely normal to feel uncomfortable. You might struggle to find the right words, make mistakes, or feel like you're not expressing yourself clearly. But these moments are not failures, they are part of the process. Every mistake helps you improve, and every attempt builds confidence. The more you speak, the easier it becomes. You don't need a perfect situation to start. You can practice on your own by talking to yourself, describing what you're doing, or repeating sentences you've heard. Saying things out loud is important because it trains your pronunciation, helps you form sentences faster, and makes you more confident using your voice. You can also repeat phrases from videos, copying the way native speakers talk. This helps you learn natural rhythm and pronunciation over time. If you get the chance to speak with others, take it, even if you feel nervous. Real conversations help you think faster and respond more naturally. You don't need to be perfect to communicate. Most people will understand you, even if you make small mistakes. What matters is that you're trying and improving. The key is consistency. Speaking a little every day is far more effective than avoiding it. Over time, you'll notice a clear change, you'll hesitate less, think faster, and express yourself more clearly. Confidence doesn't come from waiting, it comes from action. The sooner you start speaking, the faster you improve. Method 4. Learn phrases, not just words. One of the most effective ways to improve your English is to stop focusing only on individual words and start learning complete phrases instead. Many learners spend a lot of time memorizing vocabulary lists, thinking that knowing more words will automatically make them better at speaking. But in reality, knowing words is not the same as knowing how to use them naturally in conversation. Words rarely exist on their own. In real life, people speak in phrases and patterns. When you learn a word by itself, you still have to figure out how to use it correctly in a sentence, which can slow you down and create confusion. This is why many learners know a lot of vocabulary but still struggle to speak fluently. They're trying to build sentences from scratch every time. Learning phrases solves this problem. When you learn a phrase, you're not just learning the meaning of words, you're learning how they are naturally used together. For example, instead of just learning the word get, learning phrases like get up, get ready, or get started gives you ready-to-use expressions that you can apply immediately in real situations. This makes speaking faster and more natural because you don't have to think as much about structure. Another benefit of learning phrases is that it improves your listening skills. When you hear English, you'll start recognizing full expressions instead of trying to understand word by word. This makes it easier to follow conversations and understand meaning more quickly, even if you don't know every single word being used. A simple way to practice this is by paying attention to common expressions in videos, conversations, or anything you listen to. When you hear a useful phrase, write it down and repeat it out loud. Try to use it in your own sentences or even in your daily thoughts. The more you repeat and use these phrases, the more natural they become. Over time, your brain starts storing these phrases as complete units, almost like shortcuts. Instead of building every sentence from zero, you begin to rely on patterns you already know. This makes your speech smoother, faster, and more confident. When you shift your focus from single words to complete phrases, you don't just learn English, you start using it the way it's actually spoken. Method 5. Keep it simple and consistent. One of the biggest mistakes people make when learning English is overcomplicating the process. Many learners try to follow too many methods at once, use advanced materials beyond their current level, or spend long hours studying in a way that feels exhausting. While this may seem productive at first, it often leads to frustration and burnout. When learning becomes too complicated or overwhelming, it becomes harder to stay consistent, and progress slows down instead of speeding up. The truth is, you don't need complicated strategies to improve. What matters most is doing small, simple actions consistently over time. Learning English isn't about cramming or how much you can do in one day, it's about what you do every day. Even dedicating just 15 to 20 minutes to focused practice can be far more effective than long sessions done irregularly. Small, repeated steps allow your brain to absorb information naturally and gradually build understanding. Consistency works because it keeps the language fresh in your mind. When you engage with English regularly, your brain has time to process and remember what you learn. Each exposure strengthens connections in your memory, making comprehension and speaking easier over time. In contrast, long gaps between sessions make it harder to retain information, and you often feel like you have to start from scratch. Keeping things simple also makes learning more motivating. When your routine is manageable, you're more likely to stick with it. For example, listening to English for a few minutes each day. Practicing speaking or reviewing a handful of phrases is enough to create progress. These small habits may not feel impactful immediately, but they compound over time into significant improvement. Another advantage of simplicity is that it reduces unnecessary pressure. You don't need to be perfect or do everything at once. The focus should be on showing up every day and gradually improving. This creates a learning process that feels natural and sustainable, rather than forced or stressful. Over time, these small and consistent efforts start to transform your skills. You begin to understand more, speak with confidence, and feel more comfortable using English in real-life situations. The key takeaway is clear: intensity doesn't matter as much as persistence. When you keep your learning simple and consistent, improvement becomes inevitable, and progress feels both achievable and rewarding. Method 6. Use English in your daily life. One of the fastest and most effective ways to improve your English is to make it a natural part of your everyday life. The more you surround yourself with the language, the faster your brain adapts, and the easier it becomes to think, speak, and understand English naturally. Start with small, simple changes that don't feel overwhelming. For example, changing the language on your phone, computer, or social media accounts to English is a simple but powerful step. Every notification, message, or menu you read becomes a mini lesson, helping you learn new words in context without spending hours memorizing vocabulary lists. Another approach is to intentionally expose yourself to English content. Watch videos, movies, or TV shows in English, even if you need subtitles at first. Listening to real conversations allows you to hear pronunciation, tone, and the rhythm of natural speech. Podcasts, music, and news programs in English are also great tools, especially when you listen while doing other tasks. Passive exposure like this may seem small, but it gradually trains your brain to recognize patterns and words without forcing memorization. Active use is just as important as passive exposure. Narrating your day in English, describing what you see around you, or even planning your tasks in English forces your brain to produce language, not just understand it. Writing short notes, messages, or lists in English reinforces vocabulary and sentence structure, while speaking out loud builds confidence and fluency. You can even try simple exercises, like describing your surroundings in English while walking, or summarizing a video you watched in a few sentences. Consistency and immersion are key. The more English becomes a part of your environment, the more automatic it feels. Your brain starts to recognize words and phrases naturally, and comprehension improves without conscious effort. Over time, your vocabulary grows, your understanding of sentence structures strengthens, and your speaking becomes more confident. Finally, remember that every interaction with English counts. Checking social media, reading signs, watching a video, or writing a quick note, all these small moments add up. By intentionally incorporating English into your daily life, you turn ordinary activities into learning opportunities. This approach makes learning feel natural, practical, and enjoyable, and it accelerates your progress far more than isolated study sessions. Method 7. Read and listen at the same time. One of the most powerful ways to improve your English quickly is to combine reading and listening at the same time. When you read a text while listening to it being spoken, your brain makes connections between pronunciation, spelling, and meaning. This not only helps you understand how words are used in real-life situations but also trains your ear to recognize correct sounds, intonation, and rhythm. Over time, this method strengthens both your listening comprehension and reading skills simultaneously, allowing your brain to process English more naturally and automatically. A good place to start is with simple, easy-to-understand materials, such as short stories, graded readers for English learners, news articles written for beginners, or subtitles from videos. Listen carefully to the audio while following along with the text. At first, you might not understand every word, and that's perfectly fine. Focus instead on noticing how words are pronounced, how sentences are structured, and how ideas flow together. As your confidence grows, you can gradually move on to more advanced materials, like podcasts, audiobooks, or videos for native speakers. Language learning apps that provide synchronized reading and listening are also excellent tools for this method. Active engagement is a key part of this technique. Pause when you hear a sentence, repeat it out loud, and try to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, stress, and intonation as closely as possible. This practice, sometimes called shadowing, not only improves your listening skills but also trains your mouth and brain to produce English sounds naturally. Additionally, highlighting or writing down new words, phrases, or sentence patterns helps you remember them and reinforces your learning. You can even create small flashcards with phrases or sentences that you hear frequently, and review them later to solidify your memory. Another tip is to combine this method with thinking in English. As you read and listen, try to paraphrase what you hear in your own words silently or out loud. This encourages your brain to actively process the language, improving comprehension and speaking simultaneously. Over time, you'll start to recognize phrases instantly, understand grammar in context, and even predict the way sentences are likely to continue. By combining reading and listening consistently, your brain learns through multiple channels, which accelerates your overall language learning. You'll find that understanding spoken English becomes easier, reading becomes faster, and speaking becomes more fluid because your brain has already internalized the sounds, patterns, and structures of the language. This approach not only builds skills faster but also makes learning more engaging, natural, and enjoyable. Method 8. Repeat and imitate native speakers. Another highly effective method to improve your English is to repeat what you hear and imitate native speakers as closely as possible. This technique, often called shadowing, helps you develop natural pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency. Instead of just understanding English, you actively train yourself to sound like it. When you listen to a sentence and repeat it out loud, you're not only practicing words, you're practicing how the language is actually spoken in real life. At the beginning, it's important to focus on short and simple sentences. Listen carefully to how the speaker pronounces each word, where they pause, and how their tone rises or falls. Then repeat the sentence out loud, trying to copy not just the words, but also the rhythm and flow. This might feel difficult at first, especially if the speed is fast, but with practice, your ear and your speech will start to align. Over time, you'll notice that your pronunciation becomes clearer and more natural. One of the biggest benefits of this method is that it trains your mouth and brain at the same time. Many learners understand English but struggle to speak because they're not used to producing the sounds. By repeating and imitating, you build muscle memory in your speech, which makes speaking smoother and more automatic. This reduces hesitation and helps you express yourself with more confidence. To make this method more effective, consistency is key. Practicing for just a few minutes every day can lead to noticeable improvement over time. You can use videos, podcasts, or any audio content you enjoy. Pause after each sentence, repeat it, and if possible, listen again to compare your pronunciation with the original. You can even record yourself and play it back to hear the difference. Another useful tip is to combine this method with understanding. Don't just repeat sounds, try to understand what you're saying. When you know the meaning of the sentence, it becomes easier to remember and use it in real conversations. This turns repetition into something practical, not just mechanical. Over time, this practice helps you speak more naturally, with better pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. Instead of sounding slow or robotic, your speech becomes smoother and more fluent. By consistently repeating and imitating native speakers, you train yourself to use English the way it's actually spoken, and that's what makes the biggest difference in real communication. Now that you know these 8 powerful methods, it's time to put them into action. Learning English doesn't have to be complicated or stressful. By listening, speaking, reading, repeating, and using the language in your daily life, you can make real progress faster than you think. Remember, consistency and practice are what create lasting improvement, and every small effort counts.